spends the winter at the hotel. But before he leaves in the spring this time, he gives Morris a locked iron box, which he says contains papers of value and importance. Morris, of course, being a good guy, sticks the box in a corner on a shelf and hangs on to it and doesn't think anything of it.
Bunk.
But
Morris, of course, immediately opened the box to find out what was in there.
well, according to the story that is out there, Beale never came back. And Morris, being a good guy, was going to wait. And according to and this is where the accountings get a little fuzzy. I've seen accountings that said Beale told Morris not to open it for 10 years.
Yeah, he sent him a letter, actually.
Yeah, is that how it went? Because I've seen accountings both ways.
Yeah, I sent him a letter that said, if you don't hear from me from 10 years past the date of this letter, then open the box. I love his instructions, too. Open the box first, remove the lock. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and so he eventually does open the box. But Morris waits 23 years to do it.
Yeah.
So it's 1845 before curiosity ever gets the better of him and he finally pops the thing open. When he opens it, he finds several things in there. He finds a note written by Beale in English to him. And then he also finds 3 sheets that are just full of numbers. And the note evidently reveals a little bit about Beale himself and what's going on. And here's what it is. According to Beale, in 1817, he and 29 other men headed west to explore the country. And this is pretty much the Wild West. And they went all over. I think you said, Joe, you had seen they had been in Mexico?
Yeah, they went to Santa Fe and then up north into Colorado. And that was Spanish America back in those days. That was back when the Spaniards ruled it. And then after that, just a little bit of history. It was along in about 1820, 1821 was the Mexican Revolution. The Mexicans overthrew the Spanish. So the Spanish previously had controlled that territory. And
the Spain Spanish.
Yeah, the Spain Spanish.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, when the Spanish were overthrown, then Spanish control and authority over that area went away. And the Mexican government was fairly incompetent and had its hands full at home. And so that whole part of the U.S. was really kind of
ignored?
Pretty much not under any sort of government at all.
Okay.
It truly was the Wild West.
And it was no man. It was every man for himself. Do whatever you want while you're here.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Well, according to this letter, 1817, which is just a little prior to that, these guys had gone out and were looking to make their fortune. And according to the note, Beale says, the party, encamped in a small ravine, were preparing their evening meal when one of the men discovered in a cleft of the rocks something that had the appearance of gold. Upon showing to the others, it was pronounced to be gold, and much excitement was the natural consequence.
I like the understatement. I like the way they wrote back in those days.
Yeah, no, it's a little flowery, but I like it.
It was the natural consequence of things.
Naturally.
Yeah.
The note goes on to explain that Beale and his men had mined that site for 18 months, at which point they'd obviously accumulated a large quantity of gold and silver, which they seem to have found nearby. And they agreed that they needed to move all of this gold somewhere safe, and they decided to take it back home to Virginia, where they were going to hide it in a secret location.
Yeah, that sounds safe.
Yeah, and in this trip back to Virginia, Beale says that he traded some of the gold and silver for jewels, which I can understand because they would be lighter.
So wait, okay, Beale went by himself?
According to his letter, he doesn't mention anybody else.
So according to his letter, his friends were like, hey, you're the most trustworthy of the dudes.
Yeah.
We're going to give you what's equivalent to $20 million today in gold, and just send you on your merry way. Well, right? That's what that letter says, right?
It does.
And the thing that's absurd about it is if they're really worried about the safety of their gold, and you send one guy off with basically 20, because I calculated the weight of his first trip, and at 250 pounds per horse, it's about 20 horses. So a 20 horse pack train, a single guy, and you guys are just thinking, oh, I feel so much better than Mr. Beale, who's got all of our gold on 20 horses. He's riding alone through this territory rather than us having to worry about somebody.
Through the Spanish and Indian territory.
Exactly,
right?
for like territory.
And they were going from where? Probably New Mexico.
I think Colorado.
From Colorado.
Where they
went
Virginia.
to Santa Fe and then up to Colorado, and then he was going all the way to Virginia, and it was obviously
safe.
Because and if nothing else, accidents happen. So even if the Indians don't get him, even if the Spanish don't get him, even if robbers don't get him,
landslides,
he could just fall off his horse and hit his head or whatever, and then
this one dude.
But I did hear another version of this story in which it wasn't just him; it was actually about almost half the group went back to Virginia with him the first time. And so that
makes more sense.
That makes a lot more sense, because that means if you got a bunch of guys and everybody has one pack horse that he's pulling behind them, although where they got the horses, I don't know. They might have traded with the Indians.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I feel like with that much gold, you can buy kind of anything.
I don't know if the Indians were all that interested in gold, though.
Maybe the gems? Oh, wait, he would have traded that en route, so that he wouldn't have had these precious gems at the start.
Maybe the Spanish were, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Just saying.
Conquistadors loved them some gold.
Gold.
They did.
Not to stereotype, but they loved them some
gold. That
is
so viciously racist. I can't think of anybody who don't love gold, really.
Okay, well, let's get back to this. What the letter said.
Yeah.
The letter says that at the end of the winter, when he had left Morris the first time, so he had left the Washington Hotel in Virginia, he had gone back, and the men, of course, while he was gone during this time...
We're busy mining gold and hiding it from him this time around.
We're busy continuing to mine the gold. Now, mind you, is that he got there in the winter and he left in the spring, which has got to be 2 to 3 months. So this guy's had to have been gone 6 months.
Yeah.
And all his buddies are just still merrily working away.
I don't know. Yeah, but, like digging in winter in Colorado, I don't know. They might have been. They might have just been
hanging out, holed up somewhere.
They might have been just
warm.
like spending all their time like hunting for food and stuff like that, trying to stay warm.
Yeah, I don't know. Beale leaves Virginia in what I would guess would be the spring of 1821 and heads back to his guys. He's been gone a while. They're, of course, still mining everything. And they, in his absence, say, well, we've got all this new gold that we've mined, and you've been back for a while. We should probably secure this as well. So they send him back on another trip. Well, he's got it stashed away in.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's at it, they tell him to find a reliable person who they could confide in their secrets so that if something happened to them, their relatives could be alerted of this cache of gold and silver and jewels and come and take their share of the money. So this is the reason that Beale supposedly left Morris with this iron lockbox with a note in it.
Yeah. Although, and so that was his second trip back. And again, in another telling of the story that I heard, Beale and all of the guys came back on that second trip. So that is just one more version of the story.
Which makes it even weirder that they would have left the lockbox with him.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't seem really necessary at that point.
Yeah, that seems cart before the horse.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. Sending him back all by his little lonesome doesn't make any sense either.
No.
So I calculated, by the way...
Already there's some weirdness going on.
I calculated the weights, the weight of his second journey, and he would have only required about 14 pack horses for that one.
Oh, only?
Yeah, only 14.
Only 14 pack horses. Well, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Well, like we said, Morris gets the box and he opens it and he decides, I've got to figure out what this cipher says because he is morally obligated, according to the story, to find these relatives and get the money to them to get their share.
Mm-hmm. So quick, pulls out his Apple computer and starts does a little program,
little CSS or C++,
do a little word counting.
Oh wait, there's a problem, Joe.
Yeah,
they didn't have computers then.
Oh,
he was using an abacus.
Yeah. Oh, they didn't have computers then?
No,
really.
They haven't always had computers.
How did they get on the internet?
How did they take selfies?
They did not.
Oh my God.
Okay, well, in 1862, so this is 17 years after Morris has opened the box, because he opened it in 1845, He's 84 years old, and again, this is according to the accounting.
Mm-hmm.
He realizes that he doesn't have much longer to live, and he needs to tell somebody. So he shares this story with an unknown confidant. This person, we never know who this person is, but we do know two things about that person. First, they turn around and they publish the letters from Beale along with the cipher in a pamphlet and begin to circulate that pamphlet around.
Mm-hmm.
And the pamphleter also evidently deciphers one of the codes.
And his deciphered text appeared in that first pamphlet.
It appeared in the pamphlet. Yeah. According to this pamphlet, this guy, or I guess it could have been a woman, this person decoded...
Thank you for pointing at me while saying that.
Well, it would have been worse if I pointed at Joe.
Yeah. Well, I guess it could have been a woman.
Yes.
That's
thank you for conceding that point.
Yes.
Well, if you pointed at me, I would have said, a woman, that's exciting.
The pamphleter decodes the second page of the cipher. And supposedly figured out what it was. They say that it was... This person determines that it's a book cipher. And this second cipher has 800 numbers on it.
Wait, we talked about book ciphers with Tom and Trude, didn't we?
Yeah, we were talking about like things like one-time pads, and there's other things like book ciphers, not the same as this particular book cipher. But say if I take a book like To Have Not by Ernest Hemingway, starting from the first page, that's one way of doing it. Is you go for the first, you
start counting the letters.
Yeah, well,
or the words, I should say.
Yeah, well, there's various ways. You can just go letter by letter. So translate yours by adding letters to letters, and not skipping words or anything. And that's one way to do it. And that generates a number. Or you can do like this one is, where you have a number which is the number of the word in the entire sequence of the document, and you take the first letter, which really seems to be like a really cumbersome encryption technique.
It is very cumbersome, but evidently this guy says that he deciphered it using the Declaration of Independence.
And the second one, not the first or the third.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's an odd...
He figures out the middle one of the bunch, which is weird.
That is a little weird.
And we're gonna share with you what this supposedly decoded text says. And Joe, do you mind reading that for us?
Not at all. I have deposited in the county of Bedford, about 4 miles from Beaufort's, and Beaufort's, by the way, was a tavern, in an excavation or vault 6 feet below the surface of the ground, the following articles belonging jointly to the parties whose names are given in number 3 herewith. The first deposit consisted of 10,014 pounds of gold and 3,812 pounds of silver, deposited November 1819. The second was made December 1821 and consisted of 1,907 pounds of gold and 1,288 of silver. Also jewels obtained in St. Louis in exchange for silver to save transportation and valued at $13,000. The above is securely packed in iron pots with iron covers. The vault is roughly lined with stone, and the vessels rest on solid stone and are covered with others. Paper number 1 describes the exact locality of the vault so that no difficulty will be had in finding it.
You have a qualm?
Okay, I understand people wrote like more eloquently and more thoroughly in those times, sure.
Yeah.
But if you're writing a cipher, especially one that's this complex, why do you say something like in an excavation or vault?
Yeah,
I just had like that specifically.
It's odd
because
stands out to me.
Yeah, because you're thinking like wow, this is going to add another 15 minutes to the encryption process.
Or even like, why include this, right? I mean,
simplifying it is what you're getting at.
Right, you just say like, hey, for the people who have the key for this is where it is, right? Why write 3 full different manuscripts in the super complicated cipher? I'm sorry, in 3 different super complicated ciphers,
or
right?
Or the same cipher with 3 keys.
Sure, and have it say flowery, like really, really crazy stuff.
Well, but you've got to remember today's language is much more abbreviated and to the point, and that to him may have been shortened.
in an excavation or vault, I feel like...
I'm not defending it. I'm just saying it could have been to him. That was the shortened version.
Yeah, but maybe it was, but I think that he could have pared this down to about a quarter of its length.
Totally.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He could have just said, hey, about 4 months of Buford, there's just a ton of gold and silvers and jewels, and that's all people need to hear about. And maybe 6 feet under in a stone vault.
Well, but to defend Beale a little bit, though, he does need to describe how much is there so that everybody has an accounting. So if I show up and I'm taking some and I come back for some more, and person number 2 arrives and says, hey, I'm here for my share. Oh, yeah, so this is what was here. I just got here as well. You have to be able to kind of hold everybody to some kind of honor system, wouldn't you?
I guess,
maybe.
But I think that, you just leave that in the vault. Right?
Then somebody taking it can alter the accounting too.
Sure, and that's fine,
or
but
just remove the account.
I just think that it's such a crazy, weird circumstance.
I understand your point. I completely do. Here is how much money in today's value was in this vault, supposedly.
Okay.
Gold, silver, and gems. According to the research that people have done based on this, they say it's $30 million worth.
Whoa.
Maybe, and it might even be more.
It depends on when they made this calculation. 'Cause gold and silver fluctuate. Gold's really valuable.
Gold's been going way the hell up for a couple of years.
And also what gems, right?
Yeah, it depends on what gems they are.
Because you don't know. It's like some
Is it
kind
diamonds
of precious
or
gems.
just, basic rubies? Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. So here's the thing, though, is there's 2 other ciphers, which one supposedly gives, cipher number 3 is supposed to tell the names of the other men and or their families.
The next of kin.
That seems like one that you would maybe not code.
And
not necessarily.
Not necessarily, because then it's, you can blackmail people. But then number 1 is supposed to give the exact location of the treasure. But
isn't it traditional to use a map?
Like an X? You would think, but nobody's been able to figure out what the cipher says.
Not even the NSA?
Not even the NSA, according to the NSA. All we know is that it's that 4 miles around Buford's, and people have continued to go out there and dig based on where they think the treasure is going to be. And by the way, people who own property in that 4 mile radius
They're
area,
probably not real thrilled about it.
They hate this mystery because they randomly find people trespassing and digging up stuff on their property.
But I can think of 2 cool angles to this. Number 1 is if you really hate somebody, you could set up a fake web page, claiming to have solved the mystery, and give the directions to your enemies. Or here's another thing: supposing you own some land out there and you want to put in a swimming pool. You see where I'm going here?
Yeah, totally.
Big sign in Looney Tunes style: treasure here, just dig, with a big painted X on the ground.
Totally.
Yeah. I can see some useful permutations to the whole thing.
Oh gosh. Well, nobody has figured it out. People have been trying to use the Declaration of Independence to crack the other 2 ciphers, which isn't working.
Do we a little bit want to talk about the problems with the deciphering of the second one with the Declaration of Independence?
Well, yeah, let's do that right now, and we'll start in on the theories, and that's part of it. And the first theory, which there's a whole ream of things in this theory, but the first theory is that this whole thing is a hoax.
Well,
So what do you got, Devin?
Well, so in some of the research that we were doing, it says, well, if you just use the Declaration of Independence as a book cipher, right, then you get this message exactly. But
you actually don't.
It turns out that that's actually not the case. When you actually use the Declaration of Independence to decipher this cipher, it actually reads, I had deposited in the Kunigp of Berghurt about 4 miles from Bulhunds.
That guy had quite a thick accent, didn't he?
Or Isalt, 6 fist below the surface of the ground. It continues on.
Yeah.
Right? But so it's
So the guy was using a wrong version of the Declaration of Independence.
I think that kind of sounds, and obviously I haven't done the legwork on this. I can't tell you personally from personal experience which one's correct, but I can see how somebody would look at that text and say, that person's trying to say that.
And here's what I think we need to explain for everybody. You're using the official copy of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
This, in the pamphlet, they discover that the version of the Declaration
is not the same.
They were using, it's an abbreviated version that supposedly was being used in publications for newspapers and stuff like that.
But not like widely distributed.
No, it wasn't a hugely distributed version of it.
Yeah,
but that's what he is saying, this is the one I used, and he prints his copy, I understand, in this pamphlet.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious about it. It does seem like the abbreviated version would be more convenient in terms of typesetting to print your pamphlet.
Oh.
Cloud suspicion over the whole enterprise.
It's a little weird.
Yeah.
It sounds like he was writing the pamphlet and he just got that and reverse engineered the cipher and printed the whole thing.
And that's what a lot of people say. And here's some other facts. So we're just gonna run through some facts as to what is supporting that maybe this whole thing is a hoax. And I'm just gonna start at the top in no particular order. Historically, there is no evidence that Thomas Beale ever existed, in other words, census data, or that he hired 29 men who then went off on this expedition. To defend, there's no record of Thomas Beale, though. The census at that time did not take the name of every person.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
They took the name of the head of the household. So he could have been living at somebody's house, and they took the head of the household's name and then not his. So,
or he could have missed the census.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not...
He was out west or something like that.
Exactly.
It's not like it was all-encompassing by any means.
Very, very true. Let's see. So there is evidence that Morris, the hotel owner, he was a real person. He existed. But there's no evidence that he was ever in possession of the lockbox or the ciphers. And there is record of him owning that hotel, but according to the records, he didn't get the hotel till about 3 years after when he was supposed to have first, or owned the hotel until 3 years after he supposedly first met Beale.
Okay, so what kind of evidence were they hoping to find that he owned this lockbox? Like
a
they're
diary?
They're trying to substantiate who is who.
But I mean, I guess what evidence are they hoping that he was like, oh, dear diary, today Mr. Beale gave me a box and then I held it for 23 years. I mean, was that the kind of evidence they were looking for, or were they hoping
I think they were
that
just trying to substantiate that he was a real person and not just a fictional character, which Beale at this point kind of
might
be.
Seems like he might be. The thing about Morris is if he was a real existent person, supposedly he must have had descendants, and he must have told his children and grandchildren about this mystery.
You would
think that there would still be people alive today that would know about this. Nobody's come forward.
Yeah, but again, according to the story, he never told anybody. But he also worked on it for that whole time that he had.
And then he confided in this one guy.
But his wife didn't know, his kids didn't know.
Did he work on it?
Weird.
I guess I didn't get that from the story.
According to the story, he tried to figure it out for that 17 years after he opened it before he confided in his friend, who then cracked the second paper.
Okay.
Here's another problem. The pamphlet itself quotes the letters from Beale, which supposedly were written in the early 1820s, 1820 forward, and they use words that were not normally in circulation till about the 1840s, specifically the words stampede and improvise. Those were not commonly used words. There's not a lot of record of those being in the vocabulary at that time.
The pamphlets use those words?
No, the pamphlet reprinted the letters from Beale that were in the lockbox that were in English.
Well,
and in his letter, he uses words that weren't known until the 1840s. So that disappoints people to say, well, these were common words at the time, and the guy made it all up, and he wrote these letters.
I guess my argument back on that would be that, like, if Beale did exist, right, he clearly had a flourish for the English language.
As did a lot of people back in those days.
As did a lot of people back in those days, but he, for whatever reason, kind of strikes me as the kind of person who would have some kind of
knowledge of those words.
Yeah, or like to appear like he's much smarter than he actually is, so like seek out words that people didn't usually use and use them. Everybody knows that guy, right? Who like uses words that nobody else uses. He could have been one of those guys. Who knows?
He could have easily been one of those guys. You're right.
Yeah, entirely possible.
And it's not like they were words that didn't exist.
Okay, another interesting aspect of this, if the whole thing was a fiction, this entire pamphlet was just basically a hoax. The guy, at one point, apparently, I have heard that his full name was Thomas Jefferson Beale.
Oh.
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson Beale. So Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence.
Which would explain why the Declaration of Independence was the key.
Yeah, and also there was a guy... there's a guy named Beale. I can't remember his first name.
It was also the Washington Hotel.
Yeah, the Washington.
So there's another key.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy named Beale was a guy who, I think in the 1830s, was one of the first, if not the first person to transport gold from California, from the California Gold Rush, back to the East Coast. Yeah. And of course that was like, much early. And so if you think about it, if you're going to concoct a hoax, and you want to put some little teasers out there to sort of like,
grains of truth.
Yeah, but also at the same time, kind of mock and tweak the people that you're fooling. Because you're putting these obvious little, it's kind of like the Da Vinci Code. You're putting these obvious little clues right in their face. Thomas Jefferson, Declaration, Beale, this guy famous for transporting gold across the country. It's kind of. Those are kind of interesting coincidences.
On the other hand, I guess this is going like a little bit past the this is a hoax thing, right? But haven't people actually, like people who actually know about things like this, examined these and said, no, they look like they are actually real ciphers?
They have.
So I guess my argument against it being a hoax is that, like, why invest that much time
I don't
in a
think,
hoax?
I think that something that looks like it's a cipher, you can compose something that looks like it's a cipher doesn't mean it's not gibberish. It can still be gibberish.
I guess that's true.
Here's the other weird thing about the ciphers. It's number 1 and number 3, so page 1 and page 3. Cryptographers have looked at it, and I don't say that I understand how they came to this conclusion. But they say that the statistical characteristics of it make them believe that it is not from a language that is English. In other words, it could have been written in Spanish or, I don't know, Cherokee or something.
That's fairly easy to do, I think, as it turns out, right? That you can analyze the frequency of letters in any given language, because we have some that are super frequent, or the composition of the length of a lot of our filler words, and analyze how often those are used in a cipher, or something that could be that.
What's hard for me is that the stinking thing is all numbers.
Well, yeah, but you say, like, this is so 3 is A, right? So, like, how many times is 3 used? Well, that, and it's fairly quick to do on a computer, I think. Say, hey, could any of these be A?
I've done frequency analysis myself with a computer, but the thing about this particular cipher, and this is why I don't understand how they could possibly think.
This is why I don't get it.
That this was something besides English. It obviously could have been, but how you could conclude that it was any particular language, because there's no spaces, so you have no clue as to the length of the words that are being used in there. There's no spaces between the numbers. You can't do frequency analysis because they're referencing words all throughout the document. So number 117, number 3, number 52, those could all be A. So they're not repeating
the same number.
They're not repeating numbers over and over.
So
again.
but then that's my question. It's a string of numbers, but how do you know it's 115, not 115, right? How do you know it's like 115, not 115?
There are commas between them,
or dashes,
between them, right?
or something.
Yeah, they had separations between them.
They've got some form of separator between them. Otherwise, you're right. It would just be
so then it's just
an
a string of letters that
you
break up into words.
Yep, and as you decode the letters, you figure out that it's THENE N. Well, is that then? But then you figure out the next letter and you realize that N is the start of a new word. So you know to put a separator in there.
All right, that's helpful. Got it.
It's difficult to kind of wrap your brain around, but it's a little odd.
It's definitely a cipher, but not necessarily a cipher because it could just be gibberish.
It could. And here's the last thing that I have that kind of points to maybe this whole thing as a hoax. Is that it's very similar to a story by Edgar Allan Poe